The Instagram that we know is changing, and in a year's time, the platform is going to look very different. Let's talk about it. By the way, this video is sponsored by Riverside, more on them later. Okay, so the first major trend that's shaping the future of Instagram is all about carousels. And let me tell you, I couldn't be happier about this trend. Carousels are now outperforming Reels for many creators. Let that sink in. Carousels are becoming the dominant format that's actually allowing creators to not only reach more of their existing audience, but now also reach a new audience and therefore grow as a result. Now, in 2024, Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, said this.
Carousels often get more reach than photos.
He goes on to explain that carousels get more reach than your standard photos simply because each slide gives you a brand new opportunity for you to reach a new audience. Let me give you a real life example of this, right? If you follow me on Instagram, which by the way, it's at Jade Beason on Instagram, so go ahead and do that if you're not doing that already. But if you follow me on Instagram, you might be scrolling through your home feed one day and you might see the first slide of this carousel pop up. Now, this first slide might not do it for you, so you might just carry on scrolling. The next time you open up your app though, you might see this slide, which is the next slide of the carousel, and so on and so forth, which basically means that if I've uploaded a carousel with 20 slides, because yes, you can upload carousels with up to 20 slides now, I am potentially giving myself 19 additional opportunities to reach a new audience beyond that first slide, which is why Adam said, I always catch myself when I call him Adam, like we're not mates, Adam Mosseri, which is why he clearly said that carousels can get more reach than photos. But we're talking about getting more reach than Reels now. Now, a few people have done different studies and tests on this. No. Scratching my sofa. Now, the reason why people believe this to be the case is because a few creators have done some tests to see whether their carousels are getting more reach than Reels. And obviously there are so many different variables which could be influencing the outcome of these tests. However, a lot of people have reported that their tests have showed that their carousels actually get more reach. And the reason for that is because their carousels tend to get more engagement. And if you know anything about the many algorithms which power Instagram, it's that if your content gets more engagement, it will get more reach. That is one of the main signals that Instagram is looking at in order to push your content out to more people. So if you get more engagement through your carousels, then guess what? You're going to get more reach through them too. So what does this mean for you and I? It doesn't mean that we should stop posting Reels. This isn't a call to arms to say like, bin the Reels. Still share Reels. Reels are still great at helping you reach a new audience. However, if you've not started to diversify and experiment with carousels as part of your content plan, now is the time. If you really want to take your carousels to the next level, a lot of people are reporting higher engagement and therefore reach when they use carousels for storytelling. This is actually a trend that has been brought over from TikTok. Shock. That happens all the time. On TikTok, when carousels were first introduced, people immediately started to use them as a vehicle for telling a story. So each slide that you swipe through brings you further and further and deeper into a story. Now, traditionally, that's not how we use carousels on Instagram. They're usually used for like photo dumps or step-by-step guides or tips. And you can still use them in that way. I very much do. However, if you want to stay ahead of the curve, I do recommend experimenting with using carousels to tell stories instead, because I do think in a year's time, that is the content that's going to be thriving on the platform. Another trend coming to Instagram is all about micro niches. I don't want you to panic. This isn't going to be a segment where I tell you that
niching down is back in and everyone needs to be hyper specific with the content they create.
That's not what I'm saying. When I talk about micro niche content, I'm talking about posts individually rather than creators. So this isn't me advising that you need a niche per se. It's more me pointing out the fact that content, so individual posts that are hyper targeted and super specific, tend to be performing super well at the minute. Now, there's a few different factors which are driving this. The biggest one is the fact that on Instagram, there's a huge trend in regards to people connecting with others in smaller behind the scenes spaces. For example, in broadcast channels, in their DMs, like private sharing. I'm doing this because like how private is anything online, but private sharing on Instagram has been growing significantly year on year for a while now. That's why Instagram are constantly releasing updates and new features to their DMs, because they know that people are using their DMs to share content more and more. Now, what that trend is creating is a need for people to connect over very specific, very similar interests in private communities. And that is why super targeted micro niche content is starting to thrive. Let me give you some examples. Sorry, I just realized that I pronounce thrive with an F. Thrive. That's the second time I've done that today. Whew. Nothing like getting a camera in your face to make you realize that you're not using proper English. So let me give you an example. There might be a lifestyle creator out there who talks about all types of content. Amazing. However, she might be sharing individual posts that are super targeted and super niche. For example, she might run as part of her health and fitness journey, and she might upload a reel which is all about her skincare routine for runners. Do you see what I mean? I'm not saying that now all of her content is only about skincare for runners. I'm just saying that when she posts, she does so in a way that it's super specific and super highly targeted. targeted. And studies have shown that creators are finding a lot more engagement when they upload content like this with a very narrowed focus. So, as you can tell by what we've said so far in this video, Instagram is clearly changing. Before we move on to the next trend driving all the changes on Instagram, I do want to take a moment to talk about how it's becoming more and more important that we're equipped with the right tools to not only master Instagram, but content creation as a whole, which is why I'm very excited to talk to you about a new tool by Riverside that's going to massively help you achieve this. So in order for me to introduce the tool, let me just ask you a question. Can you imagine a world where your videos could magically and automatically turn into a blog post, a thumbnail, or a short video clip without even lifting a finger? That is exactly what Co-Creator by Riverside does. It's basically your creative partner that helps you repurpose your content in seconds. Let me get my Riverside up so that you can see what it looks like in action. Okay, so on the left, you can see an example of a video that I've uploaded to Riverside or recorded directly in Riverside. And on the right, you can see Riverside Co-Creator. As you can see, Co-Creator is giving me the ability to instantly create a highlighting clip, Instagram caption, and a blog post. There's even a chatbot function on the bottom, which allows you to ask Co-Creator for additional assistance. So the best way to use this is to ask your Co-Creator to help you produce different assets. It's designed to make repurposing not just easy, but like instant. Like, it's actually blowing my mind, the capabilities of this new tool. As you can see in my demo on the screen, all it takes is for me to select different assets for it to produce, and within seconds, it's giving me the first draft. So maybe I want to turn this YouTube video into a blog post, a LinkedIn post, an email newsletter. You can literally draft all of these things within seconds. And one of my favorite things about using AI in this way is that all of the content being produced is coming from your original content. So you can rest assured that the different points that you're including, the different tips that you're including, they've already come from you. It's not like AI is completely making it up. It's already come from you and what you've produced. It's just making the process of you repurposing that into multiple types of content seamless and incredibly easy.
Today, I'm going to share with you my goals for
Incredible. Now, the Co-Creator is built into Riverside so that you can record, edit, and reproduce all in one space. So if you want to get started using this tool, which I really feel like a lot of you will, you can join Riverside via the link in my description, and you can use code Jade Beason when upgrading your plan to get 15% off. Thank me later. All right, the next trend, which is changing Instagram as we know it. So dramatic. It's all about high quality, high production content and how it seems to be making a major comeback on Instagram. Let me fill you in if you're not already familiar with, I was gonna call it the law. It's probably not the right phrase, of like high production value content versus like raw, unedited, shaky content that was having a real moment on Instagram within the last couple of years. Essentially, Instagram very started off as like a photo editing app. I remember a lot of people used to use Instagram simply to use the filters and not actually to share content, right? So that's its origin story. It was all about a lot of editing and it was all about the filters. Then a little known app called TikTok entered the scene, and TikTok popularized raw, unedited, shaky content where people have terrible lighting, terrible audio, but none of that matters because it's more about the actual content itself, right? That trend then filtered through to Instagram. So over the last few years, you would have heard a lot of people, I'm one of those people, it's me, talking about the fact that raw, unedited content on Instagram is making movements and that your content no longer needs to be this aesthetically pleasing, beautiful grid style content anymore. That's not needed. Now, in true Instagram and social media fashion, the tides are turning again. Whilst this raw, unedited content can still thrive on Instagram, so if that's you and you love it and your audience love it, just disregard what I'm about to say. Like, you can carry on doing that. What's also starting to pick up some pace on Instagram is highly edited content again, but this time it's about the high-end production value. Have you seen some of the reels that are going around on Instagram at the minute? Sometimes I open them up and I'm like, no, this is a movie. Like, this deserves to be on the big screen. The content that people are producing is insane. The quality of it, the creativity of it is absolutely wild. Now, I will say that this type of content is a lot more popular in certain niches like self-improvement, business, etc. So it's not across the board. But if you are someone who leans more towards the high-end production value side of content, I'm here to tell you to carry on leaning, because that can see a lot of success on Instagram, especially in this day and age. Are we really interested to see how much of an impact this has across all niches in like a year's time? I'm hoping we don't end up in a situation where in order for your content to perform at all, it needs to look like it's part of a movie, because nobody's got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But I do think it will filter through to other niches, and you're going to start to see more of the high-end, aesthetically pleasing content flood your algorithms more and more over the next year or so. The next trend is all about storytelling on Reels. Now, I actually think I've used the word storytelling multiple times just in this video alone. So you you've probably already picked up on the fact that this seems to be a bit of a trend happening online. Obviously, a lot of content creators will tell you that they've always focused on storytelling, and that's probably part of the reason why they're super successful. However, for a lot of other creators, storytelling has never been front of mind, but it should be now. A lot of reels are shifting from pure entertainment to pure narrative. Like there is a start, there's a middle, there's an end, there's a surprise, there's a character, there's a tension point. And if you're listening to that thinking, oh my God, Jade, I didn't know that much went into storytelling, then I'm going to direct you to this video because I break down storytelling specifically for content creators, so you will find it incredibly valuable. Now, creators are building mini story arcs through their content, and they're also carrying those through into their series and even their story content. I believe the reason why storytelling is being adopted by more and more creators online is because when you get good at telling a good story, you get higher attention. And there's been a huge shift from an algorithm perspective across multiple social media platforms, which has meant that retention and watch time are often the most valuable things that you can get in order for your content to do well on the algorithm. Like if you upload a reel and people watch majority of that reel, Instagram will take note and it will push it out to more people. Creators are pretty smart, right? They notice this. Every time they tell a story through their reels, they're like, wait, this seems to be performing better. And therefore they're leaning further into it and it's becoming more of a trend across the board. A perfect example of this before we move on to the next point is the slight shift in how vlogs are now shared online. Previously, if you were doing a day in the life vlog, you would just be sharing clips from your day and the voiceover would just be you describing what you're doing in your day to day. Now though, you'll notice that the most successful vlogs are ones where the voiceover is telling a story. The voiceover doesn't even need to be relevant to the content that you're seeing. Like that's the wild part. But if you have a good story that's being communicated over a series of clips, then you will likely end up with a vlog that's going to perform better than if you're just describing what you're doing in a day to day. And that is on the power of storytelling. The next trend that I'm seeing is all about pushing the boundaries of what it means to be creative on Instagram. You have probably seen posts like this or like this online recently. I certainly have, and I'm obsessed with them. They basically create the illusion that one Instagram post is feeding into the next one. So they're like pouring water or champagne or whatever from one Instagram post and it's being collected in a glass in the Instagram post under it. Now, obviously that's all in one post. Someone's just been very creative and very clever and they've produced something that's highly engaging, super interesting and scroll stopping worthy. That's not my favorite sentence that I've ever said, but you get the point. Now, Instagram's algorithm seems to love these types of content. And I think the reason why is because they're so engaging and almost a bit confusing, like it's an illusion. So it takes you a minute to understand what's going on, that a lot of people are stopping to watch it, try and figure it out, which means they're probably lingering on the post for a while. And then as a result of them figuring it out, people tend to engage with it because the general response to seeing creative content like that is like, well done. Well done for putting a bit more effort into your content, to thinking outside of the box. I'm going to engage with your content as like a pat on the back. Good job, right? I think we're going to see a huge spike in content like this over the next year. I think scrolling on Instagram and seeing a post that just looks incredibly creative and honestly quite technical to produce is going to become the norm. Now, alongside that will probably mean that that type of content won't get as much engagement as it's currently getting, because once we get used to something, it tends to lose its shine, which means that if you're tempted to push the boundaries of creativity and create a post like this, now's the time to do it. You heard it here first. Thank me later. The final very important point that I need to make here is that Instagram will continuously change. These are just the changes that I've spotted now. I'm fairly confident will impact the type of content that we see on Instagram in like a year's time. However, I will probably need to share an updated video of this in 6 months and in 12 months time, because that's the whole point. Yes, the platform is changing frequently, but it has to. If we look at this graph of the product life cycle, everyone get your marketing hats on. Guys, I've not asked you to get your marketing hats on in years. Get them out, dust them off, put it on, right? This is the product life cycle. What this represents is the different phases that products go through in the market. Instagram is firmly in the maturity stage of its product life cycle. If anything, it's towards the end of the maturity stage, which means it needs to reinvent itself. And it needs to continuously reinvent itself so that hopefully it can trigger this product life cycle again, it can have its peak, and it can compete with the likes of TikTok and other new apps. The creators who adopt and adapt to these changes early are the ones who are going to see the most growth. So as frustrating as it is, I'm here to help you. I'm here to tell you when the trends are changing so you can get ahead of the curve and hopefully see some growth as a result. So that's it. I hope you found that useful. If you feel like hanging around, I do recommend watching this video. I mentioned it earlier. It's all about storytelling for creators. A very important video for all creators to watch. Do not forget that you can sign up to Riverside and get access to their insane co-creator tool by visiting the link in my description. Also, you can use code Jade Beason to get 15% off when upgrading your plan. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I can't wait to see you in my next video.